Harp's house. In your eardrum. Man, wherever you want me to be.
You're now listening
to Harp's house. Thanks everybody for tuning in to Harp's House. I'm your host, Jonathan Harper, and we're talking about a special edition of UFC 209. We're going to be recapping some of the main fights on the card, and I'm here with my fight expert, Stan Tucker. Stan, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well, Harp. How you doing?
I can't complain. No, can't complain. So let's start off with the main event. We had Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Tyron Woodley. What did you think about that fight?
I understand why so much of the public feels pretty terribly about the fight, but I'm not entirely surprised. I feel like because the last fight that they had was such a war, psychologically, both fighters are probably coming into this second fight wanting to correct the mistakes they felt that they made in the first fight, and therefore they're scared to take a chance because both fighters are such good counterpunchers that they don't want to make that mistake and lose their opportunity at the title.
And the champion, Tyron Woodley, said exactly that in the post-fight interview. He was saying, we're both counter fighters. He said he was a lot smarter going into this fight than he was the last one because he had an idea of what Wonderboy was going to do. And like you said, he didn't want to get caught, so he was very cautious. I was actually at the fight with a good friend of mine, Mercedes Lewis, who's a big UFC fan, and we were like 3 rows from the cage. And it was interesting. We were both looking at the fight. It seemed like Woodley was just basically going around and around the ring, just kind of trying to stay out of harm's way and not really taking any chances. And Wonderboy was kind of cautious himself, but it just didn't seem like either fighter really got out the blocks, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the dynamic between these two is such that Woodley especially, if he comes in and he's throwing his hands, your hands can only be at one place at a time. So if you're letting your hands go, you're opening yourself up to counters. And Thompson, having that ridiculous reach that he has, he's a very wiry fighter and a super dangerous striker. So all you have to do is make a mistake, and then next thing you know, you're getting a spin kick to the ribs,
right?
Because you try to come in too aggressively.
Right. So
I think that circling and really picking your spots wisely somewhat neutralize the natural the dynamic striking that Wonderboy usually presents.
Right. And we were sitting right in front of Nate Diaz, and he was yelling. He was like, yo, this fight is bogus. These dudes shouldn't get any of their purse. Dana should take their money. Him and his brother were both pretty upset because, like you said, they just weren't fighting. I was listening to some of the analysts on ESPN in the post-fight, and they were saying both of them, like you said, were being so cautious. But after the first round, it's like, okay, well, who's gonna start to press the pace and really start to be aggressive? But neither fighter kind of got to that point. As a matter of fact, Dana said he had Wonderboy winning the fight on his card 3-2, and I was with Dana. I had Tyron losing the majority of the fight, but that last flurry in the 5th round, I felt like won him the fight. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. What do you think?
I did have Thompson winning the fight 3-2. I felt that a couple of the rounds could have been scored either way. It's like you could score a round. If somebody wins 3 minutes of a round and the other person wins 2 minutes, or let's just exaggerate that and say one person wins 4 minutes of the round, the other person wins 1. If that 1 minute was more devastating in terms of the pain inflicted than the other person's 4 minutes of dominance, or I wouldn't even say dominance, but 4 minutes of winning, is different judges have different philosophies on how they rank that round, how they score that round. Is it the quantity of time that you're in control of the round, or is it the impact when you are in control of certain moments of the round? So that I could get why that would be tough to score, but also there's also the philosophy in the champion, or the burden being placed on the challenger to significantly beat the champion and therefore strip the title. Could I watch this fight and say the title should change hands based on the performance? I'm not sure I could say that.
Right. I guess you would say, I mean, that makes sense because when you think about it, like the old adage goes, like you have to beat the champion, you have to take the belt from him. And I'm not necessarily sure that Thompson took the belt from Woodley, but I don't feel like Woodley really defended his belt particularly well either. So it was kind of it was just a fight that I don't think the fight really set well to anybody for that matter. And as a matter of fact, Tyron was getting, I was there and they were, like I said, booing pretty much from like the second round on. The crowd was booing pretty loudly. It never got going. It was never like action packed until, like I said, that last flurry by Tyron in the fifth round. And Dana, like I said, he was not happy with the fight. He said Tyron did nothing all fight. He said that in his in his post fight press conference, and Tyron said he's felt disrespected, and he says the UFC as a promotion hasn't really gotten behind him as he felt like they should because he's a black fighter. What do you think about that sentiment from Tyron?
I don't totally agree with him. I at the same time don't totally disagree with him. I think that it's different strokes for different folks. There was a fighter, John Fitch, who would win 90% of his fights except for against GSP, I believe. But Dana White was very clear saying that John Fitch just fights boring fights. So he doesn't like booking John Fitch, even if John Fitch is beating fighters that are way more exciting than him because he had a very boring, some would say, style of fighting. One fighter in particular that I think, for instance, to just play devil's advocate and I guess highlight what Woodley might have been saying, Rashad Evans, for instance. Rashad Evans was winning 90% of his fights in his prime, and he was getting title shots. He was the champion for a brief moment in time, but some people felt that he was getting slighted in promotion because he wasn't a quote-unquote likable character with a lot of the UFC public. And it wasn't due to any actions of his own. He wasn't somebody who was getting in trouble outside of the cage. He wasn't somebody who was disrespecting his opponents or acting too pompously. And quite frankly, a lot of, Evans' wins came via knockout or stoppage. So why he didn't get the same bump that, for instance, the Diaz brothers would get, maybe it has to do with the fact that a lot of the fans are into the bloodlust aspect of the sport, so they would rather see a Diaz go out there, be the aggressor, even if it means that they get beaten up pretty badly, than for somebody to wisely win today and, like they say, look good tomorrow.
Right.
Right. You can look spectacular in your next defense, but the thing that Woodley wanted to take away from that night was he just wanted to make sure that strap was still on his shoulder.
Right. And like you said, I think he just thought that if I come out here and I don't get knocked out, I don't get, like you said, my lights put out, I think I'll be all right because he knew that Thompson was a counter striker and they were pretty much just dancing the whole fight. And like you said, he just wanted to leave with this strap at any cost, and he didn't really care how it looked. But I don't think the UFC promotes him any more or any less because he's always on the UFC in terms of doing stuff with FS1, being a co-host. So they definitely put him out there a lot. But I just don't think that this fight was I guess you would say this fight isn't a fight that you would say that the UFC needs to respect you more because this wasn't a good showing by any imagination.
Oh, not at all. And it's kind of interesting because you saw the fight, you were there. I watched the fight, and when I looked at the stats, I thought that I was looking at some aberration. It said that Woodley actually had more total strikes than Thompson, 70 to 66, and then in significant strikes, it was Woodley with 54 to Thompson's 53. Plus, he got the knockdown and the only takedown of the fight. So, there's the optics of Woodley kind of dancing around the ring, looking unwilling to engage. But then when I look at the stats, I was thinking, maybe I need to watch this fight again and see if there was something that I might have missed throughout the course of it. I think that one thing that both fighters wanted was, because of how competitive and exhausting and brutal that first fight was, I don't think either one of them wanted a repeat of a night like that. Because truly, I mean, fights that are that close, that competitive, and can actually shave months, if not years, off of a fighter's career.
For sure. For sure.
When fighters have like the really dragged out wars, those are career shorteners. As much as the crowd loves them, they're not good for longevity. So
not at all.
But But yeah, let's not make any mistake. This was one of the worst main events in recent UFC history.
And like you said, I think both fighters took so much damage. Specifically, Wonder Boy took a lot of damage in that first fight. And I don't think he wanted to just jump out there head first and get hit with one of Tyron's bricks, because you could tell like they were tapping hands every time the round would end. And it wasn't like a lot of bad blood. I think they developed such respect for each other after the first fight. Neither one of them really wanted to, I guess you would say, receive any of that damage or that pain going into this fight. They just wanted to get through it and see how they ended up, and then just kind of move on from there. I don't think either one of them, or like you said, that neither one of them are built like Nate Diaz. They're not about that action.
Oh, not at all. I think that they want to win. I don't think either of them are in a rush to really get hurt. However, I mean, you only get so many cracks at the title, so
exactly
being given, being given two opportunities to take that title from Woodley, and you could argue that he squeezed out, the last decision, or that he should have squeezed out the decision. But if you've had two opportunities to significantly beat the opponent and you came up short, whether it was through the draw or through the controversial decision, it's really tough to justify the fact that he should be champion, because he had such an impressive string of wins before fighting Woodley that this just seemed like it was a wall that, for whatever reason, he can't significantly, or at least in these first two attempts, can't significantly and definitively beat Woodley. Not that Woodley significantly and definitively beat him, but again, if the status quo holds, then in this case, it looks like the champion is still the champion, which, I mean, it's unfortunate, because I think that if you place them against the next competitors 2 through 10, say the contenders 2 through 10, I think that Thompson, because of his skill set, would have better results against more fighters than Woodley would against those same fighters.
Right. No, I get it. Yeah, because I remember he beat the hell out of Rory McDonald, and I saw that he beat the hell out of Johnny Hendricks. So yeah, it was unfortunate. That's one of my favorite fighters. I really wanted Wonder Boy to, like you said, crack through and get the title, but it may be one of those it's just a bad matchup, like in basketball. Like you could beat one team 8 out of 10 times, but this one team you just can't get over the hill. It seems like something about Tyron, he just can't get over the hill. But like you said, it'll be interesting to see when and if he gets another title shot, because he was the number one contender, but that division is pretty stacked at the top. I mean, you got Robbie Lawler, you got Damian Maia, you got Carlos Condit, Neil Magny. So they're going to all want their shot, their title crack, because, I mean, how many times are you going to allow Wonder Boy to just keep fighting the same fight? You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And in defense of Wonder Boy, I don't see anybody else in that division who has strung together enough wins to say that they should be ranked above Wonder Boy. Because the only person in recent years and months that has been able to neutralize Wonder Boy's remarkable skill set has been Woodley.
Right.
I think that at the very least, if one of these other guys want a shot at the title, that they should at least have to go through Wonder Boy.
Right. Yeah, and I think if Wonder Boy can win his next maybe 2 fights, he'll get another title shot, because he's just hovering around the top. And like you said, I don't see anybody else in the top 5 of that division who's gonna just knock him off his pedestal. So it'll be interesting to see, like you said, where the welterweight division goes from here, and whether or not Tyron can hold on to his belt. Because I mean, where do they go now? Does he have to fight Robbie Lawler again or Carlos Condit? So
yeah, and even Neil Magny, the last win that he put together was barely a win at all, and it really didn't look that impressive. I mean, he also has a unique matchup problem, but again, I just don't think that he's beaten enough good fighters to really warrant a title shot.
Right.
So yeah, I think Dana's gonna have his hands full trying to keep that division interesting without another Wonder Boy Woodley fight, which I don't think anybody is really dying to see at this point, besides maybe Thompson. I mean, again, on paper, it looks like this should have been a blockbuster rematch, but for whatever reason, the matchups didn't lend themselves to that type of action.
Yeah, I think the card in general pretty much fell flat. But we're gonna take a break and we're gonna talk about one of the main scratches on the card, and we'll be right back on Harp's House. And we're back from our first break on Harp's House. We're talking about UFC 209 with a post-fight recap with my fighting expert friend Stan Tucker. Now, one of the big, I guess you would say, pieces of information that the public got a chance to bite off was Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson. That was supposed to be the co-main event. That was supposed to be for the interim lightweight championship. But Khabib Nurmagomedov had to pull out due to complications from a weight cut. Now, what do you think about that?
It's tough to tell how weight cuts are going to affect different fighters at different times. I think that if you're a 23-year-old, 25-year-old, that cutting 15 to 20 pounds is different than if you are, pushing 30 or obviously beyond 30. I think that this is one of those things where it makes sense when you look at the strength advantage that you should have by cutting weight and then rehydrating the night before the fight. But I think that in totality, that it does more damage to the fighter's body than good.
Right.
And I think that in the case of Khabib, that for whatever reason, I don't know if his regimen was any different than it normally is, but the weight just didn't come off as healthily as it had in the past.
I was talking to my friend about like the whole theory of weight cutting, and we were saying like the theory is if you cut weight, you're going to be fighting somebody who could possibly be walking around as a smaller person than you. But like you said, over the course of 30 weight cuts, that takes a toll on your body to just cut down 10 to 15, 20 pounds off of your frame, because it's like you said, you're dehydrating your body. So sure, you're going to be quote unquote fighting somebody who might be walking around smaller than you, but just like the sheer cut of it, it just takes it takes a toll on your body, especially over the years. Like you said, once you become older, that's why fighters start to fight at I guess you would say heavier weights, because they just can't cut like they used to, because they don't bounce back fast enough, and they also have trouble cutting that weight when they get older.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think that the speed in which you have to cut the weight, whether you're given a 6-week period or a 4-week period, or if the fight's put together very quickly, sometimes it's a 2 to 3 week period.
Right.
And the thing about Khabib is, so he's a 5'10" fighter, fighting at the 155 weight class. His walk around weight is actually 195 pounds.
That's nuts.
So he is cutting 40 pounds to get down to the weight, and then has to go out there, rehydrate, and somehow muster up the energy to fight at the highest level.
Right.
So 40 pounds, that just, in boxing, it was Tim Bradley, for instance. Tim Bradley would walk around at 185, then sweat down to 147 and fight. Ricky Hatton would be walking around at 180, 185, drop about 40. They actually used to call Ricky Hatton Ricky Fatten, because of how much he would fatten up before cutting the 40 pounds to jump back in the ring. So I just think that it's one of those things where the more science that comes out, I think that it's just going to show that the destructive nature of that type of weight cut, especially when it's as dramatic as Khabib's 40-pound weight cut in this case.
And the fact that he had to be admitted to the hospital, as I saw was reported, it's just a lot for your body, because you're already training so hard to get ready for it, and it's a combat sport, so it's like you're grappling, you're punching, you're kicking. It's not like, it's just, fighting is something different. It's not like I said, playing basketball or in the batting cage. Like, this is something different. You're getting ready to go into battle, so your body has to be ready for it, and it's just so hard on your body to continue to cut, and like you said, up and down, up and down. Dana said there's a possibility that Ferguson might fight Conor next, because Ferguson was at the fight, and he was saying, like, when the UFC camera was on him, he was doing like the belt thing, like saying he wanted his shot, which sucks for him because he's kind of left out in the cold. Because one day you think you're fighting for the interim championship, and the next day you're just like, oh no, never mind, your fight's off. So I wonder, like, where does he go now? Do you know if how does that purse work? Do you know, like, does he get any money, or like how does that work? Do you have any idea?
In most cases, they just don't get paid. They just don't get paid the money that they were supposed to get paid. I know that in boxing, sometimes they have contracts. I'm not sure how this works in the UFC organization, but sometimes depending on what caused the fight to be canceled, the fighter has some recourse to be able to recoup some of that money. For instance, Deontay Wilder was supposed to have a fight with Alexander Povetkin at the heavyweight division, and Povetkin turned out he was using PEDs and he was using basically steroids. And so Wilder actually sued him and actually just had a $5 million win in court to make sure that he got paid, because he trained, and it's sad and it's unfair because these guys go through the exhausting process of entering the training camps, doing everything they have to do to prepare themselves physically and mentally for these fights.
For sure.
Just to find out the day before your big moment, all of a sudden that opportunity is lost. So
and you have people to pay. Like, you have to pay trainers, you have to pay nutritionists, you have to pay doctors, you have to pay a team of people to get you ready for this fight. So then to just be like, oh, sorry guys, we're not going to fight. Somebody has to pay them. So that ends up being the fighter. So he's like, well, I'm not going to take this massive L. Somebody's going to have to pay for this money. So I don't blame him. I'm glad he took that dude to court. That's messed up.
Yeah, big time, and it's really unfortunate just because Khabib and Tony Ferguson are both such great fighters. I mean, if you look at Khabib's his background, I mean, this guy is well skilled at the highest levels in sambo, judo, freestyle wrestling, pancrase, and so he runs the gamut in terms of his disciplines. And there's also a little backstory on some of his Russian ops, on some of the organizations that he's been a part of that kind of trained him since such a young age to be well equipped for all styles of combat. So gotcha. I mean, that's just a dangerous guy. And I mean, if you look at his record alone, he is 24-0 in mixed martial arts competition.
Right.
And in a sport like the UFC or in mixed martial arts, where you're using such little gloves, it's one of those things where you could totally be prepared. You could be the baddest dude walking the planet, and all it takes is just one punch with these small gloves to put your lights out. And the fact that he's been able to string together 24 wins without facing that type of unfortunate result just kind of speaks to his level of discipline, his level of training, and just all-around skill. He's got world championships in sambo, grappling, pancration, M1 Global, all of these different organizations. So he's as decorated a fighter as you could get, and I just really, really wanted to see that fight between him and Ferguson.
I felt like I thought I heard somebody say that he was thinking about retiring too because of the lingering injuries he kept getting during training camps and things like that. And I think I overheard somebody saying that Dominic Cruz kind of talked to him about injuries and how, like, to overcome it and don't let it, I guess you would say, take you away from your career, because like you said, he's so good at it. So it is good to say that, to see that he's been fighting for like you said, so long and overcoming some of these injuries, because like you said, he's undefeated, but it's like, man, I wonder, is he going to ever get his shot now? Because, that was his shot to be next up against Conor.
Yeah, big time. And to be honest, I don't know if he'll be able to fight at that weight class if he does continue fighting. Because right. I think that this was more just a telltale sign that maybe he should fight at the next weight class up. But to be mentally resilient to where you work through those different injuries and those different setbacks, not losses, but other setbacks, whether it's due to injury or in this case exhaustion and everything that put him in the hospital, just to be able to come back and be able to fight through that. Just if he is able to accomplish that, that says a lot about the guy.
Absolutely. Let's take a step back for a second about the Rashad Evans and Daniel Kelly fight. You were talking about Rashad earlier. What did you think about that fight? I had Rashad winning that fight. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't a very entertaining fight, but I just felt like Rashad got the best of Kelly, but I guess the judges didn't side with me because he definitely lost it when, like they say, you never let it go to the judges because it can go either way. So, what did you think about that fight?
So he scored 30 fewer strikes than Daniel Kelly. He scored 20 less or 20 fewer significant strikes than Kelly. I think that it was really tough to score because I couldn't get over the disappointment that Rashad was looking that bad. And I think that even with judges, as objective as they're supposed to be, and as blank a slate as they're supposed to come into the fight with, you have your preconceived notions of what you should be expecting of these fighters just because you've seen Rashad fight so many different times. So I feel like in rounds, even if Rashad technically won the round, I think that because of the expectation coming into it, seeing him underperform so much might have influenced how some of the judges scored that fight.
Yeah. I feel like he really hasn't gotten back since he tore his ACL back in 2014. His body rejected a cadaver ACL, so he had to have ACL replacement twice. So I feel like he hasn't really gotten back since that blow. Because once your body goes, like everything else pretty much goes after that. So, and like I always say, fighting is a young man's sport. So, and Rashad is definitely not young in terms of fighting. So I don't know where he goes from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Rashad is now 37 years old, and so even at 30, to come back from any sort of a knee injury and repeated injuries, and plus just the natural aging process of the body, plus now you're shedding even more weight to try to fight at a lower weight class. I think the multitude of those things kind of led to what we saw a few days ago, where he just seemed like a shell of himself. He seemed like he didn't have the explosiveness. He seemed like he didn't have the cardio. I mean, I know that he trained hard. I know that he wants it so bad, but after facing the knockout from Glover Teixeira, after losing another lackluster fight against Ryan Bader, and now losing to Dan Kelly, that's 3 losses in a row, and I just don't see him at 37 being able to turn that around and to have much more success at a high level. Unfortunately, I think that we've seen Rashad at his best days, and this could be this could be his last fight. He might want to continue fight another fight or two, but in my opinion, I'm not in the business of predictions, but I think that it's only downhill from here in his fight career.
Yeah, and like they say, that cliff for fighters is steep. It's not like a steady decline where you're like slowly like walking down a hill. it comes like a ton of bricks. So it'll be interesting to see, like you said, where he goes from here, because you never want to see him go out with just a debilitating knockout where you're just like that's the last thing you see of Rashad in the octagon. But I just don't know where he goes from here.
Yeah, I agree. And another thing about the weight cut, so now he wants to fight at middleweight, and he just had this horrible outing. The ability for the chin to absorb punches for whatever reason, when people drop a lot of weight, even if they had a good chin at the weight that they were naturally supposed to be fighting at, I don't know what it is about the body's chemistry, but when you drop too much weight, and especially if you drop it too quickly, for whatever reason, sometimes when you get clipped, a punch that you would normally be able to absorb and to keep on fighting through, for some reason just short circuits the whole body, and your body doesn't respond to punches in the same way as if you hadn't shed the weight. So that's another thing that he might want to consider if he thinks that he's going to keep on fighting at 185.
Yeah, like you said, I just don't see where, like you said, I don't see his spot. I don't know where he goes from here. But speaking of, like we said, weight cuts in the body, just reacting poorly. Did you know that Alistair Overeem, he beat Mark Hunt, but he had to be hospitalized twice with severe food poisoning, according to Dana. So it was a feat that he was even able to compete on Saturday night, and then the fact that he won with those 2 knees is just crazy. Because I'm sure I don't know if you've been in it, but I've been sick with food poisoning before, and it just depletes your body of all your energy, and you just feel done. So the fact that he was able to come from that and fight on a Saturday night was crazy to me when I heard about that at the fight.
Wow, that is pretty amazing, and wow, I mean, just the fact that he was able to enter the cage, with that type of illness, again, just speaks. A lot of people they'll see a fighter and they see somebody like Alistair Overeem, and he's just big yoked up dude, and sometimes you see him get his lights put out, and
Right.
sometimes you see him get it. Sometimes you see him get his lights put out by people that you think that he should be able to beat. So people will extrapolate from that and to say, well, he must not have a lot of heart.
Right.
But then you see something like this, and the way that he was able to fight with that illness and pull off the knockout win against Mark Hunt. And I think that all of these guys have heart. You have to have heart to be able to compete at this level. And this, because he's no spring chicken either.
Oh no,
And,
he's an older dude too. Yeah, yeah. Because remember he got popped a couple of years back for testosterone or high elevated levels. Yeah, yeah. And he actually. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was. There were a few times during his career where I thought that it was a wrap. There were a few, devastating knockouts that he had when he got stopped in the first round by Steve Miocic.
Stipe Miocic, yeah.
Yeah. And so he got knocked out by him. He got knocked out by Ben Rothwell, Travis Brown, Antonio Bigfoot Silva.
Yeah.
And all of those knockouts, I was thinking, well, I guess that's the end of Overeem. But no, he just keeps on. He's actually been able to string, 4 out of his last 5 fights.
Right.
He won, and 4 of those came by knockout. So I guess he still does have something in the tank.
And he's changed his style. If you look at some of those old knockouts, he's definitely changed his style to a more counterpuncher because he doesn't want to get knocked out. So he waits for you to, I guess you would say, initiate the fight, and then he became a counterpuncher, which might not be the most I guess you would say from the first fight might not be the most attractive way of fighting, but it's definitely a more effective way of fighting for somebody who's older in their career and they've been knocked out a few times. It's a smart transition to make for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only way that he was going to lose this fight against Mark Hunt was going to be being too aggressive because Mark Hunt's only about 5'9", 5'10". Overeem's a big dude, so he would have to be coming in and get clipped by a Mark Hunt counter for Hunt to tank him. Because Mark Hunt has that type of power. He could turn the fight around and just end the fight in one punch.
For sure.
But man, just talk about rough breaks. After Mark Hunt lost to Brock Lesnar, and then everything came out about Lesnar basically cheating. Luckily, they turned that decision around to where now it's a no contest, and so he doesn't have the loss on his record. But the damage that you sustain in the fight is still the damage that you sustain in the fight, whether they strip Lesnar of the win or not.
Right.
But it just seems like Mark Hunt has had some really tough luck in a lot of his recent fights, and unfortunately, he suffered some of the most brutal knockouts I've seen in recent memory, and this one might have topped them all.
Right, yeah, because when he got hit by that first knee and then the second one, he was literally out on his feet. He fell to the ground like a sack of potatoes. So it was like, man, this dude can't catch a break, for real.
Yeah, it was tough to watch that in slow motion, too, just because you just saw his facial expression as soon as that knee landed, where it just looked like he couldn't have sunk far enough. Like if there was a way that he could have dropped below the ring, below the cage canvas, and then below the ground, like he would have done that if he could. It just looked like he was so done with the fight after that knee to where everything else was just the finishing touches. But that totally took the wind out of his sails, and it took his heart and his consciousness out of the fight. So, and Mark Hunt, again, he seems like he's been the victim of cheating multiple times. So you would want to see that rewarded with some success. Unfortunately, it did not come in this fight.
Exactly. And like you said, that leaves us with Alistair Overeem saying hopefully he'll get a title shot soon. And he said he's going to keep his eye on the Stipe Miocic and Junior Dos Santos fight that's coming up. So that'll be interesting if he gets a shot, because like you said, it didn't look too good from the home team for a while there, and he pulled it together and he put some a string of wins together. That's definitely I guess you would say brought him back up the board in terms of the heavyweight division, because right now he's sitting at third in the class behind Miocic, Verdun, Cain Velasquez, and then Overeem is sitting right at number 3. So he's he's poised in position from a nice little comeback and late in his career for sure.
Yeah, which is amazing that he too, as we mentioned, is that resilient. Unfortunately, I think that he might just want to watch that heavyweight title fight from afar, because I think that if he gets back in the cage with Miocic, I think it's going to be more of the same. Miocic just comes across as an extremely skilled striker, and if I were over him, I would not be in any hurry to get back into that with him.
Gotcha. Well, we'll see because, like you said, he's gonna have us out on that fight, and we will too. So we'll I guess wrap this one up, and we'll come back for UFC 210, and we might have a special edition Connor versus the Money Team. So do you think that real quick? Do you think that fight's gonna happen?
Crazy as it sounds, man, I think that it will. I do. The question is, how is that fight sanctioned? The thing is, Dana wants Floyd to fight under their terms. That will never happen because of how much pull and power Floyd has in terms of the money that he makes per fight and what he's accustomed to. So he's not going to do anything with the organization. It will have to be some sort of a buyout, where Conor would then be enabled to fight in the boxing fight. But I can't remember what the court case was, but there's a precedent that was set where somebody can compete in a sport that's not totally aligned with that sport, but it's similar. But again, the money just has to work out, because if I'm Dana and Conor's under contract with me, there would be no way in hell that I would allow him to ruin his fight reputation just to make a few $1 million fighting Floyd, which will still be more money than Conor has ever made in the UFC.
Right.
Even if Floyd just gives him 25% of the purse or 30% of the purse, that will still be way more than what he makes per fight in the UFC. I just don't see Dana relinquishing that power without him getting broken off proportionally. So I think that Floyd and the Money Team would have to work something out to where that type of fight would make sense to Dana, and then Dana could let Conor ride off into the sunset or return to the UFC and continue fighting. The caveat to that is, continue?
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, it's essentially like Floyd Mayweather against the UFC, because Floyd's his own boss. He does what Floyd wants. But Conor isn't his own boss. It's like Conor doesn't operate under Conor's rule. He does what Dana says he can do. So it's like trying to play one-on-one against LeBron. Like, LeBron just can't do what he wants. He is under contract with the Cavs, and that's the flexibility that Mayweather has. He kind of does what he wants. And like you said, even if Mayweather took $100 million and gave Conor $30 million, that's like 30 times what his like purse is in the UFC, and he still said he wants more. So it's almost like Conor is almost like bidding himself out of the fight, because Floyd's like, why would I give you an equal split when you've never made more than $4 million in any fight you've ever fought in your life, and I made $100 million last time? Like, that doesn't seem logical. Why would I give you such a huge pot? So I don't think it's going to happen, just based on the money alone.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, if Conor makes that money or anywhere near that money, what's the likelihood that he's going to return to the UFC and agree to fight for a fraction of that again?
Right.
Like, where's the motivation there? It sounds like Conor knows that this is his moment in the sun. This is the absolute peak of his earning potential. So it sounds like, just the way that he sounds, after every fight, and how much he just plays his whole thumb wrestling game with the organization between fights, that he's actually just looking to cash out and just really squeeze as much as he can financially from being in the spotlight. But I just don't see any incentive for him to come back to the UFC if he makes a check that's far beyond anything that he's made in the past.
That's interesting you said that. So could you see a scenario? I just thought about something when you were saying that. Could you see a scenario where Conor would fight for maybe 30 million to Floyd's 100 million, and then Conor would be like, you know what, I'm done with the UFC. I want to start marketing myself as like a fighter and just start getting bigger purses in boxing? I wonder how that would work with his UFC contract. Because like you said, if he makes, let's say, 30 million and he's only made 3 in the UFC, why would he go back to making, like you said, fractions of what he made against Floyd? It wouldn't make any sense.
It wouldn't make any sense to anybody but Floyd and Conor, right? So Dana White is going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that nothing like that happens, because if it does, that'll set another precedent to where it would then open up the floodgates for all fighters in the UFC when they feel that their demand is at a certain point, that they would want to cross over and then to start just kind of handpicking these different contractual one-off fight opportunities to really, really capitalize on the potential. And from Dana's standpoint, he's saying, hey, we've got this organization that's been putting in money to build your name, to build your reputation,
right,
not just so you could just go off and make these one-off type of fights and make more, than we're able to pay you, just so we can lose the power and the fight and the earning potential in then booking you in another UFC event. So
right.
I just don't see Dana capitulating to something like that.
Yeah, like you said, even if Conor took like 50 million, I couldn't see him going back to 3 million from Dana. Because
That's a really tough sell.
he would drive the price up something terrible on the UFC, and the new ownership and how much they paid for the organization. That would be really interesting where Conor would go if that fight actually happens. I actually never thought about that aspect of it. Like, what's next if you have some mega payday?
Yeah, and that would really be that could be an existential threat to UFC and the way that they operate as an organization.
The inverted pyramid, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, their whole thing is they're trying to star build, right? So John Jones got in trouble, so he's been off the map for a while. Anderson Silva got old. GSP retired for 3 years. He's coming back, but he's been out of the spotlight for years. Ronda Rousey just got knocked out twice. So
right.
These stars that were hot draws are no longer available. So you need the stars that you have.
Right.
More so now than ever. And if these stars now become stars and then exercise that flexibility against the interests of the UFC, I could really see the league being in danger. So again, I think that the resistance to something like that happening is going to be very, very tough.
And like you said, it's a slippery slope and a fine line, because the UFC would love that promotion, that cross promotion against boxing along with the UFC, because everybody loves to hate Floyd Mayweather and people love to hate Conor McGregor, and it would be the biggest fight ever in the history of mixed martial arts for sure, to be on that kind of combination with boxing. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, it would be the biggest fight, but at what expense? So
yeah, making a fight like that is almost the same as saying, well, Conor, I know that you're not a unicycle rider, but hey, we'll pay you a few $1 million to come out and ride this unicycle in this circus.
Right.
And of course Conor would be down, win, lose, or draw. It just makes that much sense, but it does not make sense for the UFC unless they're properly compensated. But I just stars could just ship off.
Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna happen. But I don't know. We'll stay tuned and we'll see. And once again, everybody, thanks for stopping by Harp's house and listening to me and my boy Stan Tucker, my boxing and my UFC expert. Again, I'm your host, Jonathan Harper. And if you want to subscribe, make sure you subscribe in the iTunes store. That's Harp's House. And you can also check us out in the Google Play store. That's, again, Harp's House. You can also subscribe online. That's harpshouse.com. And you can shoot us an email. That's harpshouse1@gmail. Again, that's harpshouse1@gmail. Again, thanks for stopping by. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time around. Thanks again.